Valerie, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. For the audience, just could you tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about your organization so people know who you are, and what your company does?
Sure. Thanks for having me on the podcast. So, my name is Valerie Chan. I am the founder of Plat4orm PR, and we are a strategic communications agency that's focused on the legal and regulatory industries. We have some pretty big logos. They include LexisNexis, Xtero, and that sort of a thing. But we work with managed services providers, legal tech providers, technology providers who are in security, in addition to law firms and insurance carriers. So, yeah, kind of a very specific niche.
You do have a very specific needs. I'd be interested to know a little bit about in that needs. What are the kind of things, what are the kinds of trends or things that you're noticing that are happening in your world in that specific niche?
Sure. So it's interesting. Just by way of background, I've been in the technology industry pretty much my entire life, with the exception of practicing law for about 5 years. And so, as a practicing attorney who's been actually in-house in addition to at a law firm, I've been able to see trends from a practice management perspective. And so, in this particular niche, I think similar to the internet or similar to XML and what's actually happening with databases and cloud for that matter, Gen AI has kind of revolutionized what people are doing with data. We're still in the early adopter stage. There's a lot of buzz around Gen AI, agentic, and I'm sure there'll be nanotechnology coming out in the next, 5, 10 years. But the adoption phase is actually not yet here. It's just early adoption, and people are trying to figure out: do I work with it on a personal basis? Do I work with it on a business basis? How do I govern AI? How do I create policies around it? What does it mean from a regulatory standpoint? What do I do with PII? And so it's kind of greenfield because nothing's really come up, and with the exception of hallucinations in court cases, which everybody's heard about. So yeah,
Everyone's heard that story.
exactly.
So do you actually use, as part of your business, do
Mhm.
you use AI as part of your business to help you become more efficient or effective?
We have a couple of tools that we actually work with that have AI built into it. It's mostly on the media management and the pitching side of things.
Hmm.
We also work with some tools, marketing tools, including chat, the commercial and paid version that doesn't really put all the information out there in a public LLM. And then there's sometimes we use Claude, and then there's a few additional tools which I can't think of off the top of my head right now, especially for scheduling
Yeah,
posts and that sort of a thing. But for the
that
most
may,
part, because of the type of work we do, because we do a lot of writing and content, a lot of the content that we're writing is from a practice management point of view, so it's more sophisticated and more nuanced than what some of the tools allow for. And so we haven't found that it's actually helpful in that regard. It's helpful for some things like outlining, but then you actually have to go back and rewrite the entire thing. So just one of those things.
that that brings us on to the next thing that I was thinking that leads to is, how do you think that's going to change and say develop in the next 12 months when you start to get and be able to build your own database of knowledge that it builds on to write? How do you see that being developed?
Well, there's a lot of things that some of the processes that I've wanted to actually happen by putting kind of an AI wrapper around some of the information within organizations and within my own company for
Hmm.
that matter. A lot of knowledge is stored internally within our company, and so being able to discern some of the trends, for example, not just what does the creative brief look like, but what are the types of activities within the organization that we do a lot of the time, and what are some of the patterns that come out of it? What are some of the trends that our clients are actually working on from an aggregate perspective, and how can we aggregate it and leverage it for our clients' knowledge as well as for the industry. Or maybe there's some regulatory papers that we've actually written or actually tried to interpret, and we could aggregate all the knowledge and provide advice on where and how to manage around the regulatory environment. Those are some of the things that we could come up with in the next 12 months as tools become more sophisticated. I mean, we've kind of played around with those types of things, but it's just not sophisticated enough from a tool perspective, and then also from a billing and optimization perspective on the efficiency side. That ideally would actually help us figure out more profitability and how to manage spend from a profitability standpoint and a growth perspective. Like areas of spend would be amazing to understand. If you just invested this much more in marketing and you do it here, it'll be this much more of an output. Or like, okay, you want to grow to a $10 million organization. What's realistic, given some of the parameters? And Chat GPT or Claude or any of the other tools does, and okay, like, how do I say? When I say a first grade level, don't take financial advice from them, from the AI tools, but unless it's embedded. I mean, it's a great thing to put in there right now and try to see, but it's not a clear indicator because some of the variables are not there. Having a more sophisticated analysis of some of these different patterns would be very, very helpful to do, especially over the next 12, 16 months as AI tools evolve.
Yeah, and they will evolve. I think it's hard to imagine what it will be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the biggest thing that I've heard is, okay, AI is going to replace me. I think with any technology, oh my gosh, a bot is going to replace me. The answer is, and we're starting to see, no, it's not going to replace you. A bot's going to be your friend. It's going to be your invisible friend so that you could be more, you could be more optimized. You could have not cheaper pricing, but you could actually use more thinking power, especially since I would love to, I'm older and I think I provide good advice, or I have been providing advice for 20 something years. So it would be really amazing to actually just focus on the advice part versus the work that I would otherwise hand off to other people or not want to delegate to other people because it's too menial in nature and yet at the same time needs to get done.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people are picking up on. And it's how do they make sure that that human insight and oversight is done in the right way, and
Right.
that the systems learn from you. Yeah, that's the other challenge. If you're doing a presentation, how can it learn so the next time it's use what you've said before,
Exactly.
and it picks up and learn, and it will. I'm sure it will.
It definitely will. I think one of the things that I've noticed, and this goes back to the AI trends that we were talking about earlier, is that, and it's only because we've been doing this project on this, it's a lot of companies want to play with the technology. They want to actually do a full-scale implementation and do a rollout of it and a full-scale deployment, and yet the change management piece around that is not there. And so the ability to affect change happens when there's communication training and the rollout of standard operating procedures, in which case employees could adhere to it, stick to it, and then the accountability piece for people to actually use it. AI is so easy that people want to use it, but it's the how that people are, that kind of gets you into trouble with, like how much information are you going to put in there? And then the framework underneath it becomes more important of how you manage the data so that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands just because more and more data is going to be processed. So like the how is not actually done right now, and there's a huge like drop off cliff where the where people are not adopting all of these tools when they can because they simply don't have the communications and the training and then the SOPs around it to actually use it in the way that it's to be intended, you know?
Absolutely. I was chatting just earlier today with Carl from a cybersecurity company. He was pointing out to me that there's a Harvard Business Review
Mhm.
of companies that implemented AI projects, and 95% of them have failed, not
Right.
because of the AI, because of exactly what you said.
I have to read that Harvard Business Review
Yeah,
paper.
I haven't read it. He talked about it just
Yeah.
earlier today, but that's very, very true. And
Yeah.
isn't that always the case? Change management,
Yeah.
you've got to change with the people as well and the way their processes and their workflows, not just the technology.
And most people don't think of the workflow themselves, right? They think
Mm.
of, oh gosh, it's going to be this way, that way, and here you go, ta-da! Training's right there. And then people are just left with, what am I supposed to do with this? So really, the SOPs and the accountability piece are huge, which nobody puts in place. And it needs to either like there needs to be talked about in meetings, it needs to be talked about in one-on-ones and actually on your performance review to a certain extent about how are you using AI, how is it making you more effective in your job, and actually some sort of collaboration around it. And that's what I recommend for any technology implementation. But it reminds me when I was 20 when I used to do this on as a full-time person, a
Yeah.
college person. But I was just like, huh, I feel like it's like full circle now.
Yeah. And if there's one last thing you could give advice to people who are looking to leverage it, yeah, specifically in your target customer base, what is the things you've been advising them?
What I've been advising them is since we work with managed services providers
Mm.
and legal AI providers and legal tech, specifically, I've been actually counseling our clients to think about what the impact is for their client's workflow. So really step into the client's shoes, really understand what they're going through from a cultural perspective, from an implementation perspective, and then a long-term viability perspective. And if they're able to look at it as a framework, I know I've talked about it several times. You talk about change management, training, SOPs, and accountability structures, then you're actually be in a better place for full-scale implementation of your technology.
Thank you so much. That was really good of you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.